How's it going, everyone? So on this video, what I'm gonna be doing, I'm gonna be talking about the differences between the piston on your left and the bladder pump on the right. So, you know, people use piston, some use bladder and whatnot. So I'm gonna be breaking it down a little bit to kind of, if you're in that, decision where you want to go piston or bladder, hopefully this kind of help you out a little bit and make a choice later on down the road if you're trying to build like a little street hopper or whatnot. So I'm gonna go over on piston and then the pros and cons, then I'll go over the bladder and pros and cons. So I'm just doing from the backing plate and tank. I'm not doing no block or any of that. Everyone is going to be using their own kind of blocks and whatnot, so that'll be your choice later on down the road, but I'm just doing the backing plate and the tank. That's it. So let's go over the piston one first. So on the piston one, I mean, you already know what it is. Majority of the people, all it is you got your backing plate, you got your gauge that you're safely able to pressure it up with either compressed air or nitrogen up to 170 pounds or 175. There's people that have run 200. I don't recommend it, but to each their own. So when you have everything connected, bolted up, the backing plate and everything, when you want to pressure it up, you lock up the front and then you fill it up with nitrogen right here. You fill it up with nitrogen to your desired pressure, and you go. Majority of the time when you pressure it up, you hear this piston, you hear it pop forward for the pressure. By that time, your fluid is already inside the cylinders, car's lifted up. Once you bring it down, you got all that pressure built up. And that kind of helps you out in the hopping game to save your motor and all that. So, on a piston, I just mentioned the pros about it. You can pressure it up more. And the cons about it is when, after using it so many times, there has been issues where your piston does go off to the side. So when it does that, it starts to grind inside the walls. For some reason, your piston's not set right or whatnot, and it starts to eat up the inside of the wall, scratching it up. That right there, once you start doing that, you're gonna start leaking, have oil come behind the piston. Once that happens, it's no good to start pressuring it up like that. Another thing, downside about it is, once you start grazing the wall, scratching it up and whatnot, you will have to replace the tank and have to get a whole new piston and seals and whatnot for the piston. That's the downside of it. It's a little bit more money over the bladder. I'll go over it here in a little bit, but just be aware of that. It's gonna cost you a little bit more. So I'm gonna go over the bladder real quick. So here's the bladder. Like I said, I'm only doing from the tank up to the backing plate. So the bladder one's different. On the bladder, some people use they have like a little gauge that they install here. I don't have that yet. So what I do is, when the car is locked up, I pressure up my bladder up. And I usually run this one at about anywhere from 80 to 100 pounds of nitrogen. I don't use compressed air. I got a nitrogen tank, so I use it. On my car, it does pretty well on 85 pounds of nitrogen. I use a tire gauge, has a little release. Put that on. If I'm over 85 or 90, I bring it down to where I like to use it. You know, I still haven't maxed out my bladder pump, so you can do more, but I run it safely about 80, 85 of mine. And it does good. On my other videos, you know, it kisses the ground. Back bumper kisses it. It don't smack it yet, but it will. So let's go over the bladder real quick. For the ones that don't know or haven't seen the bladder, here it is. All it is a bag. So what it does is, once let me go ahead and bring this up. Let me go ahead and fix this up real quick. So once this is in here, I'll put it like this, make it easier. So once the bag is in here, you got your fluid inside the cylinders already, you know, lifted up. And once you pressure it up, this bag is gonna inflate inside this whole pipe. So what that does, it expands and inflates, and it's gonna cover this whole pipe all the way up to the pump head. So it's gonna create all that pressure. So once you dump it, you know, it's just like the piston. That fluid is gonna stay there. It's not gonna go back all the way over here. It's gonna stay, and then you have all that built up pressure. So when you're hopping, you know, it does the same thing as piston, build pressure for hopping. Now, the pros about these, it's less maintenance than the piston. You don't have to worry about, you know, the inside of your walls being scratched or damaged or anything. So you won't have to be changing out the tank if your piston was to go sideways and start grinding the walls and whatnot. You won't have to change it. That's a good thing about the, you know, the bladder. Less maintenance. You know, if the bag for some reason was a pop or whatnot, you know, you take the back plate out, you unscrew this. Right now I got maybe 2 pounds of pressure or whatnot. You can fill it up and it will just expand. But you unscrew the bag, take it out, take this out, remove it, you know, put the new one in, screw it on, screw everything on, it's snug and tight, and then you inflate it a little bit, give it 2-3 pounds, it'll inflate, and put it in there and go about your way. Don't forget, you'll have to replace the seal, just be on the safe side. Now, the cons about the bladder, if for some reason, you know, you got your pump head that's gonna be about right here. So for some reason, if your bladder was a pop inside and then you dump it or you lift it, where's all that fluid gonna go? All these particles, all the bag or the bladder pieces is gonna go inside your gear and into your system. So it's gonna it's gonna mess up your gear. 2, is gonna be in your system, and 3, is gonna cost you more money at the end, having to take the pump head apart, make sure it's not damaged, get a new pump head, you know, flush out the lines, and you'll have to check your front cylinders, make sure you don't have the bladder particles inside of it. And your dump, that's another thing, you have to check your dump, everything else. Now that's the cons about the bladder. Pros, less maintenance. If everything goes well, sure, the bladder could last you a year or so. But if it was a pop, yeah, it's gonna cost you money too. Either one you go, either way, either route you go, it's gonna cost money. Let's go ahead and put. Set it like this. So if you have just a regular pump on front and you want to get into the little, build your little street hopper, or you know, something to clown on people and whatnot, you have two choices. You can either piston pump it or bladder pump it. They both do the same thing, but hopefully this video will kind of show you where, you know, which route you want to take. You know, they both hold pressure. The piston pump, I do give it that. It can hold a little bit more pressure than a bladder. Due to it being a piston, of course, the piston's gonna hold more, withstand more pressure over a bladder. But if you want less maintenance, then, you know, the bladder pump probably suit you best. But you know, each one has their own opinion over the piston or the bladder. Some people, like I said, they have never even used a bladder. All they know is people using piston, and it's true. A lot of people do use pistons. But I do know a lot of hoppers out there that I've met personally. I've seen their car, and they fucking do good on the bladder. And me, my car is doing pretty well on the bladder, and I'm single pump. And I'm doing more things to my car, but I am building a piston as backup. So I'm gonna come out with something where my bladder gives out. I do got the piston to go to, and we'll see what happens. But till now, my car's staying bladder. Until this gives out, I'll have the piston ready. Y'all stay tuned. Hopefully this kind of, you know, helped y'all out. See what you like, see what works for you. Y'all let me know, you know, what you like, what you have, or what you know, what you want to do with your car. Let me know.